right, so I think they're all well aware by now that the mainstream media kind of sucks at its job, as in informing the public, seeing the bigger picture, talking about fundamental shifts that are happening in our country. Instead, they like to focus on partisan tit-for-tat and the daily developments in elections, the stuff that nobody really cares about. But over the last 2 days, I think they've really outdone themselves in terms of finding a non-story to spend countless hours obsessing over.
Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has big leads over Mitt Romney, Rick Perry, and Herman Cain.
Putting the Secretary of State up against the three GOP presidential candidates. Hypothetically, she beats them all.
If Hillary Clinton were running for president next year, she would destroy Romney, Cain, and Perry.
If the Secretary of State ran for president this year, she would trounce the competition. Her worst showing, in fact, would be beating Mitt Romney by 17 points. Join me now.
In Oakland Tuesday, 24-year-old Marine Scott Olson was hit by what witnesses say was a police projectile. Friends rushed to his aid.
We asked him his name multiple times.
What's your name? What's your name?
But he wasn't responding, so we took him to the medic.
Olson, who survived 2 tours of duty in Iraq, was critically injured with a fractured skull.
I was shocked that in this country they would do that to a peaceful protester. Scott was out here protesting peacefully.
Oakland police tactics have come under scrutiny.
We want to make sure there's a thorough and complete job and a complete comprehensive review is done of the incident.
Like other veterans and thousands of protesters, friends of Olson say he was demonstrating against a wide range of issues.
He's just expressing his First Amendment right and his conviction that the corporate greed and the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan need to come to an end.
Now Olson's story is rallying Occupy protesters across the country.
March with Oakland! March with Oakland!
In New York, they shouted Oakland as hundreds marched to City Hall. From Portland to Los Angeles.
Scott Olson is a hero for standing with the people.
Tonight in many cities, the Occupy movement appears energized.
We've all talked about the Constitution and this country being founded on it. My problem is when I start talking about it, I get very upset. So forgive me, this will pass. There has been perpetrated upon us the most heinous crime against humanity, and it goes so far back that you can't blame any of the administration because they are not a government. They are the United States Corporation. The U.S. government incorporated as a for-profit commercial enterprise in the Legislative Act of February 21st, 1871, 41st Congress, Session 3, Chapter 62, page 419, and chartered a federal company entitled United States, i.e., United States, aka U.S. Incorporated, a commercial agency originally designated as Washington, D.C., in accordance with the so-called 14th Amendment, which the records indicate was never ratified. The United States government is a foreign corporation with respect to the state. 19 Corpus Juris Secundum 541, location of United States. The United States is located in the District of Columbia. Secretary of the Treasury of Puerto Rico was appointed receiver over the bankrupt United States in the Reorganization Plan number 26 in 1950, Title 5, United States Code, Section 903, Public Law 94-564. The Secretary of the Treasury of Puerto Rico, Title 27, Code of Federal Regulations, Section 251.11, the title, Secretary of the Treasury, is a euphemistic abbreviation of the actual title, Secretary of the Treasury of Puerto Rico. The Internal Revenue Service was incorporated in Delaware, is not a part of the supposed U.S. government, which is but a de facto for-profit corporation masquerading as a government. that operates out of Puerto Rico. This is the IRS. It's not registered to do business in any state, is the bookkeeping and debt collection arm of the Secretary of the Treasury of Puerto Rico. They collect for the International Monetary Fund. Everybody who gets up into the administration, the Congress, the legislation, all the way down to the local level are corporations, private companies. We are their chattel. We are their inventory. They make money off of us, and you don't even know how deep it goes. And I apologize for my passion about this. But when I found this out, it was the only time that I felt hatred for the evil slime who did this to us.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me. And one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No, Liz." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They've just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." So I came back to see him a few weeks later. And by that time, we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense office today." And he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq, and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
So go through the countries again?
Well, starting with Iraq, then Syria and Lebanon, then Libya, then Somalia and Sudan, and then back to Iran.
I mean, this is it. Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, Gandhi, they're the heroes of mine in practice of civil disobedience to try to get the burden of government off our backs, and that's why I'm the one that protects the individual blacks who are in the city who are so unfairly being treated and thrown in prison. That's the message that needs to be heard, and I'd appreciate somebody helping bring that out rather than nitpicking over something done many years ago, which I did not write.
Did you used to read these newsletters, Congressman?
Not back then. There might have been at times I would, at times, but you know, I was in a medical practice. I traveled a lot. I was doing speeches around the country, so very frequently, you know, I never did see these. Matter of fact, some of the things you just read, I wouldn't have recognized them. And the point is, it's not part of my character. The point also is when people get charged, they usually have a clip. They never have a clip of somebody saying something, a slip of the tongue or something, and then they're blasted the kingdom come. Nobody has ever heard me say that. They know those are not my thoughts, and therefore the people have not rejected me in Texas. And in a way, this is a bit of a witch hunt. I know there's reason. I don't say that you're unjustified in asking the question, but you also have to think of the motivation behind this. And maybe this is part of the anti-Ron Paul deal. You know, I got excluded from the debates the other night. And maybe this is part knock down Ron Paul because he's gaining grounds with the blacks. I'm getting more votes right now and more support from the blacks because they understand what I'm talking about and they trust me.
I got to tell
Ron Paul, a visionary who predicted the financial crisis, a leader with a plan to solve it. The Paul plan? Balance the budget, cut $1 trillion year one, eliminate 5 federal bureaucracies, end the foreign wars and nation building, rein in the Federal Reserve, pay down the debt, cut taxes to create jobs. Ron Paul, a plan to restore America now.
I'm Ron Paul, and I approve this message.
Okay. There's a table on page 26 which consists of your balance sheet, and one of the entries on the balance sheet is under assets, central bank liquidity swaps, which shows an increase from the end of 2007 from $24 billion to $553 billion in change at the end of 2008. What's that?
Those are swaps that were done with foreign central banks. Many foreign banks are short dollars and come into our markets looking for dollars and drive up interest rates and create volatility in our markets. What we have done is, with a number of major central banks, like the European Central Bank, for example, we swap our currency, dollars, for their currency, euros. They take the dollars, lend it out to the banks in their jurisdiction. That helps bring down interest rates in the global market for dollars. And meanwhile, we're not lending to those banks, we're lending to the central bank. The central bank is responsible for repaying us.
So who got the money?
To financial institutions in Europe and other countries.
Which ones?
I don't know.
$500 billion, and you don't know who got the money?
The loan went to the loans go to the central banks, and they then put them out to their institutions to try to bring down short-term interest rates in dollar markets around the world.
Well, let's start with which central banks got the money.
There are 14 of them, which are listed in our. I'm sure they're listed in here somewhere.
All right. So, who actually made that decision to hand out $1 trillion that way? $500 billion. Who made that decision?
The Federal Open Market Committee.
Okay. And was it done at one time or in a series of meetings?
A series of meetings.
And under what legal authority?
We have a long-standing legal authority to do swaps with other central banks. It's not an emergency authority of any kind.
Anything specific about it?
Do you know my counsel says Section 14 of the Federal Reserve Act.
All right, we actually looked at one of the arrangements, and one of the arrangements is $9 billion for New Zealand. That works out to $3,000 for every single person who lives in New Zealand. Seriously, wouldn't it be better to extend that kind of credit to Americans rather than New Zealanders?
It's not costing Americans anything. We're getting interest back, and it comes back. It's not at the cost of any American credit. We are extending credit to Americans.
Well, wouldn't it necessarily affect the credit markets if you extend $500 billion in credit to anybody?
We are lending to all U.S. Financial institutions in exactly the same way.
Well, look at the next page. The very next page has the U.S. dollar nominal exchange rate, which shows a 20% increase in the U.S. dollar nominal exchange rate at exactly the same time that you were handing out $500 billion to foreigners. Do you think that's a coincidence?
Yes.
All right, well, the Constitution says no money shall be drawn from the Treasury but in consequence of appropriations made by law.
This money is not drawn from the Treasury.
Well, let's talk about that. Do you think it's consistent with the spirit of that provision of the Constitution for a group like the FMOC to hand out $500 billion to foreigners without any action by this Congress?
Congress approved it in the Federal Reserve Act.
When was that?
Quite a long time ago. I don't know the exact date.
100 years ago?
The original act is 1914, I believe.
I don't know whether this provision was in 1914 or not, but the Federal Reserve Act was in 1913.
All right, and at that time, the entire gross national product of this country was well under $500 billion, wasn't it?
I don't know.
Is it safe to say that nobody in 1913 contemplated that your small little group of people would decide to hand out $500 billion to foreigners?
This particular authority has been used numerous times over the years.
Submachine guns were drawn. The front door was kicked down. The drug dogs cased the place. The Seattle Police Department did all this just to confiscate 2 marijuana plants from a 50-year-old disabled airborne ranger veteran, Will Lodansky. After the police waved their machine guns at Mr. Lodansky's face, they shoved his face into the ground as they searched his apartment for a substance which his physician has authorized him to have and to cultivate. The Seattle Police, along with the mayor's office, have often said pursuing marijuana possession, medical or not, is the lowest item on